Last week, we were particularly looking at, well, for a start, how being present to ourselves and being present to our direct physical sensations in itself, that is an act of love towards ourselves. And our bodies, it's like our physical experience. It's like it holds our history, our psyche, our emotional tensions, our pain. All of it is held in the body if we are able to be with it very, very directly. So this has been the thread that Jinapalita has been drawing out. And it's like, not only is staying present to our physical experience an act of love, it's also, it'll allow any emotional tangles or difficult experience with relation to us or others. If we're able to let that experience, if we are able to allow that and accept it, actually what happens is the painful, negative, tied up stuff, that just kind of like releases if we're able to experience it directly. It's just like it flies free and we become free of it slowly over time. And emotions such as love or care or compassion or well-wishing, when we're able simply to be present to that experience, those positive emotions, they grow just naturally by themselves. This is completely true. So in a way, it can be a total path to unconditional love or metta purely by staying with physical sensation. And some people will love this approach. It will be their primary approach. They'll completely take off. It'll all happen. And other people aren't really like that. And I have to say, I'm one of them, okay? And I mean, part of the reason for that is simply because the body holds our difficult and painful emotion. And sometimes it's like being in the body, it can be like, I don't know, you're sitting with like a coil of barbed wire or a basket of snakes or just a sort of sense of like, oh, you just don't want to be in your physical experience. So it can be very, very challenging and difficult to try to stay with just the physical experience. And some people will find our physical experience absolutely fascinating, like, wow, the sensations in my fingers, it's fascinating, it's amazing. And for others of us, it's just a bit like, my breath's really boring. Here's another breath. Oh, and here's another breath. So I'm just trying to draw out that like one can have a variety of responses to the different ways of meditating. And actually, I do think being with physical experience is essential, and it does come into every form of meditation. So even if we find that difficult, because being in the body, it's now, it's this present moment. It's not our stories, it's not our fantasies. So it is a key aspect of every meditation practice. But what I'm going to draw out next is how we can use our imagination in our meditation practices as well. So we can do this alongside a body-based approach. Now, some people naturally know that they like to use their imaginations, or maybe they, we know about ourselves that we're very visual people, something like that. And other people say, oh no, I'm not imaginative and I don't imagine anything, and I never see anything in meditation, and etc. So, regardless of which sort of person you think you are, don't worry about whether you think you're an imaginative person or not, because in a sense we are all beings of imagination. We use our imaginations all the time, and quite often in a rather unhelpful way. So, for instance, quite often we might be imagining what somebody else thinks about us. And we can have a whole story in our minds about, we're absolutely convinced that it's true, of course. We know exactly what that person thinks about us, and it's usually like not what we want them to think about us. And that has all sorts of effects if we imagine and then we believe our imaginings about what that other person thinks. Now, what we think that other person thinks is usually to do with our own stories and beliefs from our own habits and our own past conditioning and experiences. So usually what that other person thinks won't match. It won't be what we think, because that's our ideas and our world. So they're thinking something completely else based on their world. And mostly we won't know what that is unless we actually go and have an honest conversation with them. Another way we imagine, for instance, we might rehearse conversations. Either we replay a conversation that we had and we go through all the things we wish we'd said, but we didn't quite manage to say. Or else we're maybe a bit sort of tense about a meeting or a conversation that's going to come up. And we play out in our heads all these different scenarios. Well, if they say this, I could say that. And well, if that happens, I could do that. And of course, when that conversation or that meeting comes round, well, it never goes the way we've imagined it anyway, because we've imagined it. We're not actually, however it plays out, it's not exactly the same way to the one we've imagined it. But nonetheless, when we've spent time imagining that, that person's going to respond like that, so I need to say this, that has had quite a strong effect on our minds. So if we've been rehearsing that the other person is going to say something critical or they're going to pose this difficulty, it's like we're sort of primed for that to happen, even though maybe that person doesn't say that thing or, put that obstacle in our way. But we've done something with our minds that has affected how we then respond to that future scenario that actually we don't know what it is. It's like with everything we imagine and everything we think, we're kind of programming our mind to respond in a certain way. So another way we imagine is we can catastrophize very easily. So I don't know. I mean, at the moment, if I have a slight snuffle in my nose, before I know it, I've imagined that I've got a cough and a high temperature and I've got COVID and so have all my friends and it's all really terrible. But actually what's happened is I've got a slight snuffle in my nose. So we can imagine future scenarios in which the worst case scenario happens. And then quite often we then have to kind of go into, but if this happens, then I can do that. And if that happens, I can do that. So we go into planning to try to kind of prevent all these possible terrible future scenarios from happening. Now, in a way, if this was an effective strategy, that might be quite sensible. And it's not like there's not a place for planning. But if what we constantly rehearse in our mind is stories about what we fear other people think about us, worst case scenarios about what's going to happen, worry about what's going to happen, negative stories about ourselves, because if we feel like somehow if we say it, it's better than if other people say it, or I don't know, if we beat ourselves up, then it means we're going to be a better person. Does that really work? There's all these things that we use our minds for, where we're using our imagination, but actually what we're doing is we are deepening unhelpful emotional habits of self-criticism, of worry, of panic. And actually other favourites are ill will, what the other person did wrong, or alternatively what we did wrong. There can be a lot of energy in kind of like going through all those things that other person did wrong, or all the things we did wrong. Or fantasizing. Even if we're eating the most delicious meal ever, quite often we might be fantasizing about like, oh, well, I'm having Thai now, but like next time I'd really, really like a classic English Sunday dinner. And if we're on holiday, we're not kind of enjoying what's there. We're thinking, oh, I thought it would be better than this. And we're imagining the fantasy future holiday we might have. And that's a shame, because it means actually we're not showing up for the enjoyment and pleasure of the experience that we actually are having. So there are all these ways in which imagination, we use it all the time. The scenarios we imagine in our heads can feel real and vivid. We're training our minds every time we do these imaginings. And often we aren't aware of the effect that we're having on our minds every time we go through these imaginary scenarios. But if we want to, we can also use our imaginations to take us in a positive direction, and one that we've chosen. We can really use the powerful effects of imagining, for the good, to take us in a direction we want. So with imagination in a helpful sense, well, how is it different to this sort of mind fantasizing that just rolls on by itself? So one, we're aware and we're conscious, and we are choosing to use the faculty of imagination. We know what we're doing. And we know that the emotions that we want to cultivate are kindness, compassion, well-wishing. And we can realise that actually imagination can help us communicate with all the different parts of ourselves, including our unconscious depths. And the meditation that we're about to do will explore this. Because a lot of the time, it's like we're different people. It's like we're one body with a kind of a particular name and a particular address. But actually, we can have so many kind of like sub-personalities or sub-selves. So probably part of us genuinely wants to become happier and live our way into a more fulfilling life, have a good relationship with ourselves, transform our lives, maybe our relationship with others. And another part of ourselves completely isn't up for it. It's like, actually, we just want an easy life, and actually, I don't want to drop my habit of self-criticism, because like the world will cave in if I stop telling myself I'm a bad person, or if I stop that pattern of having to achieve, or if I stop feeling that I completely have to try and look like what my person on Instagram looks like, or the celeb magazines. Or if I drop my habit of people pleasing and maybe someone's upset with me, like the world is going to end. Actually, it's much safer to stay small, not to change, keep doing our narrow habits that it's like, we've done them a million times before, and we'll get in a way, we'll keep on having the same sort of experience. It is actually very, very challenging to change. So if we can become more aware of the different parts of ourselves, and we can bring kindness to all those different parts, actually awareness and kindness is what transforms us. That is what transforms us. And imagining can bring those parts of ourselves vividly to life. And it means we can bring awareness and we can bring kindness to them. And even very difficult parts of ourselves, like maybe a very terrified, scared part, or our inner critic, actually underneath, it's like they all want us to be well and happy, but sometimes they can go about that in seriously unhelpful ways. They're just embodying old, fossilized habits, old parts of ourselves that don't serve us anymore.